of treating and handling the patients. For the same, today we have with us one of the renowned name in the field of echocardiography, Dr. Rakesh Gupta from Delhi. I welcome you, sir. Dr. Rakesh is well-known name in the cardiology community and have been contributing immensely, be it educational initiatives, books, training, relentlessly to name a few. Before we get started, due to the current situation, there has been a huge traffic load on the internet services. If you experience temporary interruption in the transmission, kindly bear with us. We will sort it out immediately and resume. I now welcome the esteemed faculty, Dr. Rakesh Gupta, to address our viewers with his clinical talk on implication of 2D strain in clinical practice, how to acquire and analyze it. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vinay. Thank you very much for those words. I'm Dr. Rakesh Gupta, calling from Jorrop Institute of Echocardiography, Ultrasound and Vascular Doppler, Delhi. And this special webinar is being conducted with an academic support of GE Healthcare Private Limited. Why we thought of this particular webinar? That is the most important issue. In last 2 to 3 months period, I was getting many calls from many people from around India asking me to tell them how to acquire two-dimensional strains, how to utilize them in clinical practice. And possibly this was the effect of a COVID virus infection. Everybody was sitting at home and trying to learn newer and newer modalities, trying to learn the update knowledge of echocardiography and cardiology so that they can apply in their clinical practice once this COVID gets over. And that is the reason we are over here to talk about two dimensions strain. Well, I'm going to make it a little different from what we have done earlier. I've got a system in my laptop, which we know as EchoPath, with which we'll be able to show a live demonstration of the acquired images to drive two-dimension strains. And along with them, I'll be showing the various applicable things which are happening today in the diagnosis, management and treatment of a patient suffering from various cardiovascular diseases, what we talk of coronary artery disease, valvular infections, right heart lesions, and so forth. So let's get going. My first slide is, if you look at this two-dimensional strain, history started somewhere in 1989 when Izaz et al. Published the first paper on tissue Doppler in that particular year. It was known as Doppler to study cardiac tissues and was named as Doppler in 1995. Then subsequently PubMed research on tissue Doppler and tissue Doppler velocity or Doppler tissue yielded a total almost 5,000 results in that 6-year period. Now, it is very interesting, more than 4 lakh papers are published around the world by this time of 2014, and by 2020 it must be around 10 lakhs papers being published in Google search talking about tissue Doppler, Doppler tissue imaging, tissue velocity imaging, two-dimension strain, and many more synonymous names which have been labeled to it. When I often talked of this tissue Doppler imaging in early 2000, everybody used to stare at me with this, of course, without a cigarette. What the hell is talking about tissue Doppler, two-dimension strain? This is the same strain which everybody goes through. This is not true. Let me just try to make it as simple as possible today. How this two-dimension strain, which is in clinical practice, evolved over a period of time. Look at this image. All of you are very familiar with this image. What this image is? This is a color Doppler showing evidence of mitral regurgitation with an eccentric jet hugging along intraatrial septum. So what exactly did they do at this time is they are getting rid of low flow velocities of the color Doppler to acquire the flow of blood in the heart, which is in meters per second. Correct? One fine young man, what he did the little reverse. What he did, he got rid of the blood flow in the heart. And then he started looking at the myocardial velocity of the tissue of the myocardium, whether it's septum or lateral in four-chamber view. And he was very intelligent to talk about whenever the heart contracts in the center or it contracts inward, it gives you a red color. When it relaxes, it gives you a blue color. Same as a color Doppler echo. Hence to say that if I'm looking at this particular image, I'm not looking at the blood flow. Now I'm looking at the contraction of the myocardium. In this view, four-chamber view, I can look at septum, I can look at the lateral, I can look at the RV free wall. So whenever it contracts, it gives me a red and a blue color kind of a combination. And when this gives a blue color kind of a combinations, we come to know whether this heart is contracting or relaxing. But we were not interested in qualitative evaluation. We were interested in quantitative evaluation. What's that quantitative evaluation was? We kept a sample volume at the annulus of the heart, whether in four-chamber view, whether it is septum or lateral or RV free wall, and looked how much LV thickened or the base moved toward apex with every systole, and how much the base reverted back during diastole. And that was given to a Doppler spectrum pattern in the form that we got an S wave, which is a systolic wave. This is with every contraction so that this annulus moves towards apex. And when it relaxes, it gives you an E wave and an A wave, which is known in tissue Doppler as E prime and A prime wave. It's not only that, it gives you much more than that. It gives you isovolumic relaxation time and isovolumic contraction time also. So we started looking at quantitative LV contraction by putting a sample volume at this annulus in 2000, early 2000. But the problem was, we were looking at only one direction of a contractions. But as we know, the heart is in three-dimensional structure. If you are looking at this one dimensions, we were ignoring the other two dimensions. In heart is consistent of longitudinal fibers, which constitute almost to 70% of the fibers, and rest 30% are contributed by radial and circumferential fibers. And this was looking at longitudinal fibers. Majority of people, they agreed at the time of early 2000, look, it's a very good technology. So much so, people, they went on to look at a tissue Doppler at basal septum, mid septum, and apical septum. And as we understand, as we go towards apex, the shortening will be less. And that's how they started looking at systolic functions. Very good utilization was used in those early periods when we were able to differentiate between dilated cardiomyopathy versus ischemic cardiomyopathy. How was that? We kept a sample volume at septum and lateral wall in four-chamber view, then anterior and inferior wall in two-chamber view, then anterior septum and posterior wall in three-chamber view. If all of them showed the same velocity, which is significantly reduced, then it was a dilated cardiomyopathy. On the contrary, if some of the velocities were normal and some of the velocity was reduced, we started looking at ischemic cardiomyopathy. And that was very good at first impression of these systolic functions. At the same time, we started looking at this E prime velocity of tissue Doppler imaging. And most important thing, what happened during the time was to evaluate diastolic dysfunction by looking at E wave of a mitral flow and E prime wave of this septal or lateral flow to drive E to E prime velocity. If it was more than 14 or less than 14, that was deciding whether restrictive or normal filling pressures. That was early 2000. When we started looking at these kind of things, when the fibers were longitudinal, radial, and circumferential, and Most important thing came when this graph was not as good as this, it had a wavy pattern. People started realizing that much more than this is happening in this contraction of the heart. And that's what they said at that moment is, look, my heart, it does not move in only in this direction. It can move in this direction, it can move in this direction, and it can have a variable direction of movement of contraction of the heart. But in 2000, this first thing they tried was one dimension strain. Again, the strain was shortening of particular segment during every systolic contraction, and this was one dimension strain during the time. And if you happen to look at this one dimension strain, we can look at the contraction of these or thickening of the septum and lateral wall in one dimension, and what we get, a trace kind of a thing which showed that these segments are contracting or normally or abnormally. How did it form? We had an aortic closure time which we inserted in our machine, or we timed our machine with aortic valve closure and aortic valve opening by putting a sample volume at aortic valve opening and closing time. When these first one dimension strain happened, the strain value was always negative because of a shortening, and it was in minus 20 degree or so was considered as normal. And all of these fibers should contract at the same time with the aortic valve closure. Look at the segment over here. This segment is normal, but this segment is contracting much after the systolic contraction. This is known as post-systolic contraction during the time. And on top of that, the contraction is less as compared to this minus 20.
Respected participants, my name is Vinay Sabrawal. I am representing G Healthcare Cardiovascular Ultrasound System. Today we are going
whatever the segment corresponds to, that is contracting less systolic contraction, and on top of that, post-systolic contraction is present, suggestive of ischemia. Things did not stay at that time over there. People started realizing, look, these waves, they can be also wavy, and they did not fall on each other. And because they did not fall in each other, they started looking at the strain values, which they said it could be in one direction like this, second direction like this, and third direction like this. Because of this, now they started thinking that why not put a sonomicrometers in individual segments of this four-chamber view. How do they do it? Suppose this is septum and this is lateral wall. I keep my sample volume over here only in basal septum and look how much it thickens. So we started looking at the thickening of this segment in at least two dimensions, one in this fashion, one in this fashion. And once we started looking thickening of this fashion, we started calling them as two-dimension strain, and this one particular segment, it showed that if its old location before contraction is this one, new location is this much, so this is the strain work of this particular segment. Hence, we moved from one-dimension strain to two-dimension strain looking at individual segments, and that's how being translated into an echocardiography, where in two-chamber view, where in four-chamber view, and three-chamber view also, we started looking at basal septum, mid-septum, apical septum, apical lateral, mid-lateral, and basal lateral. Happen to see and concentrate on this. Look, this is yellow in color, this is light blue, this is green, this is pink, this is blue again, and this is red. And when we looked at these segments, this was very, very easy to look at the two-dimension strain because we were only looking at this basal septum, mid-septum, apical lateral, mid-lateral, and basal lateral. This is a clear-cut depiction of one of the loop which I'm going to show live over a period of time. And you can get the individual value of these strain, minus 15, minus 18, minus 24, minus 23, minus 21, minus 17. And all these they were reflected in graph formats. This is aortic valve closure line. So every segment is contracting at the same time. Now there is a little variability of their amount of contraction or amount of strain, that is negative. Is that clear? So what we were getting in this, we were getting a global strain of a longitudinal contraction in apical 4-chamber view, which averaged out 19.6 in 4-chamber view. Average means all these segments they were clubbed together, divided by 6. They give you an average global strain of these 4 segments. On top of that, it gave you a systolic thickening of all these segments and the timing of contraction of these segments. Very important part was timing of contraction. And if you happen to understand the most important part in echocardiography is synergy and synchronicity. Synergy is how much is contracting. Synchronicity is whether all segments are contracted at a synchronous time or not. So this 2-dimensional strain gave you a quantitative evaluation of synergy and synchronicity. This is color-coded M mode. Now let's look at this color-coded M mode. Many people they ask this color-coded M mode. What does it mean by color-coded M mode? Now this color-coded M mode is, we have to look at this scale over here. If this is a 0 line, this is 5, 10, 15 and 20. So all these colors based on amount of 2-dimensional strain are depicted over here, whether they are light or little darker and absolutely red in color. Absolutely red means -20. This may be 15 or 5 or 10, something like that. On top of that, you look at the scale or colors over here. I hope everybody could be able to see the colors over here. They are being depicted in this frame from lateral border to basal lateral border to basal septal border. And or we can say from top to bottom is basal septum to basal lateral. Look at this. Basal septum is represented over here as yellow. Mid septum is represented over here as sky blue. Green is represented over here. Pink is represented over here. Blue is represented over here. And red is represented over here. Here is the aortic valve closure line. So we can see the individual contraction of the strain in M mode fashion, where this is -15 is the peak of this is -15. Look at the peak of this is 24. So this green color is much darker than this color of this. What is the importance of this particular frame, this depiction of a M mode? The importance of depiction of this M mode is, in one go we can understand which particular segment is delayed contracting. Suppose this yellow color segment or this yellow color segment, instead of showing a maximum red color, it shows a red color over here. We can jolly well say that this segment of basal septum is delayed contracting. And that's what the depiction of these colors in this format. Whenever we do a tissue Doppler or 2-dimensional strain, it'll give you this mobile image. It'll give you the minus strain of individual segments, then synchronicity of these images and the display of M mode color code. I hope that is clear. The same thing is being done for 2-chamber view, 3-chamber view over here, and same, look at the same thing are being done in 3-chamber. And what we get is, we get a final value. What that final value? It's a bowl-shaped presentation of this final value. This is 4-chamber view, this is 3-chamber view, this is 2-chamber view. In fact, we have looked at all the global strain values of these all 3 views. And if I have to show all these views, these are the 6 basal segment, 6 mid segment, and 4 apical segment and the apex. In majority of machines, they are considering as 18, but once we represented them as bull fashion, they show basal 6, mid 6, and apical 4 to give you an average global strain rate. Now look at this global long axis minus 19.1. Long axis means apical 3-chamber view. 4-chamber minus 19.6. 2-chamber minus 19.3. And the average of all these things is 19.3%. And any value which is more than 19 Previously it was 17.7, some said 18, some said 19. And just one paper which I read only day before yesterday in Journal of Echocardiography, when they were using that particular paper for aortic regurgitation, the cutoff value they took at is minus 19%. And that's how we look at the GLS, or a global average stain, which everybody is asking today. Can you tell me the GLS of this patient? He's not talking of segmental, he's talking of global. And at this point, I like to say that we used to spend some time earlier in the sense in about 2010, 2015, 14, when we found out that this minus 15 or minus 17, they are low stains in acute coronary syndrome, then possibly we said these values are less and patient has got ischemia. This is not true anymore, because subsequent study proved that this reduced stain could be because of a myocardium, it could be because of a coronary artery blood supply, and it could be because of microvascular dysfunctions. So we started spending less time on differential stain, but we started spending more time on global longitudinal stain, that is average one. I hope that thing is clear to all of you. So this is what is being depicted. One way of depiction is this. Another way of depiction of all three stains, and a polar map, somebody called them as polar map or global longitudinal stain, and it shows a value of a global longitudinal stain in these patients. So what I was saying, we talk of a synergy, how much it's contracting. Then we talk of a synchrony, whether all these segments they are synchronously contracting or not. Now the new thing came. Well, if you happen to look at heart, that is being depicted over here, the structure of the heart is depicted. It is made of two rounded helical fibers. One helical fibers forms the LV, the second fibers forms the LV. And this was very well appreciated by a couple of people around the world. And I would like to name one of the Indians who worked behind all this work was Parthav Sen Gupta back in US. And he demonstrated that this heart can be opened up in two turban forms, and these two turbans individually they make one LV, one RV, and both of these turbans they ultimately forms a apex as well as RV and LV. And second thing what is said was there's two kind of a fibers. One is outside epicardium, then one is inside endocardium. Epicardium, if you look at the structure of the epicardium, is left hand kind of a structure. Endocardium is right hand side of a structure. And when they contract, the word contraction they have given is twist. When they contract, one fiber goes in left side, the other fiber goes in right side. So that whenever the contraction happens, you get a neck twist. And how does the neck twist happens? I'll have to show this particular picture which you have to understand. Now look at this twist. First of all, it's evaluating not only the longitudinal, it's a radial contraction it's evaluating. If you happen to look at this and closely follow this, look, this line moves to right and this line moves to left. In the sense that if you take a piece of a cloth and writhe it, like आप निचोड़ते हैं जैसे, so what do? You turn it around. The same thing happens with our heart also. On one side, the base and the apex, they move individually in a different directions. And when they move in different direction, that produces a twist. And that twist is being depicted in a Doppler form. And this Doppler form is known as this particular form. Look at this. This is an apical twist and this is the basal twist. Apical twist is positive, basal twist is negative, and this is the net twist of this particular function. This is like almost contributing to whole contraction of the heart over a period of time. I'm not going to spend much time over here on this particular twist is because this is still in a research lab. And I can show you one example that one time it's going to be the real answer for this over a period of time. But I'll concentrate on my two-dimensional stain. Now, once we saw a left side stain, the same thing can be applicable on right side two-dimensional stains to assess the RV function where it's basal, mid and apical RV free wall contraction. Septum is considered as a part of LV, but nowadays the people have started segregating out that septum has got two parts. One part which is contributes to LV contraction, the second part contributes to RV contraction. Now, what is the applicability of this two-dimensional stain in clinical practice? First of all, I like to say the most important thing before I go live demonstration is, look, you can calculate systolic function or ejection fraction in these subset of population. How do you do that? This is a paper published in 2019 in Journal of American College of Cardiology, saying that if the global longitudinal stain which you calculate by GLS, and second is global circumferential stain which you calculate by this twist function, and formula is roughly 3 times of the GLS is ejection fraction. Suppose I said my ejection fraction is 19%, GLS is 19%, then my ejection fraction is almost 57%. The only important thing is the GCS or global circumferential stain should be normal, and that is being derived from twist. So let's go one by one and show you like how do we do a longitudinal GLS in day-to-day practice, and where we are going to utilize this in normal subjects, in coronary disease, ischemic versus dilated cardiomyopathy, stress echocardiography, aortic stenosis, mitral regurg, aortic regurg, pulmonary embolism, diabetes, hypertension, chemotherapy. Let's look at LV. LV, we look at LV function like ejection fractions. We look at valvular lesions. We look at a stress echo. We look at right heart, and then we look at research work. In LV, we look at a normal heart, ischemic and dilated cardiomyopathy. In valvular, we look at MR, AS, and AR. And then in stress echo and right heart, we utilize them in day-to-day practice. The other word I said research, but it is being very well used in day-to-day practice. I'm going to show you those few examples, like how do we unearth telling that somebody who's a diabetic is started having a subclinical LV dysfunction, saying that possibly he's going to diabetic cardiomyopathy. Similarly, hypertensive patients who are having a subclinical dysfunction because of hypertension, they develop hypertrophy, and they start ejection fraction will not fall, but the GLS will start falling, saying that the LV has started failing, and which we can recognize very easily by GLS. As far as chemotherapy is concerned, this is very well established tool now. For breast cancer chemotherapy, when we use this anti-chemotherapy, anti-cancerous therapies, we look at the GLS of the patient before starting a chemotherapy, then before giving the next dose of a chemotherapy. And if the GLS has fallen down more than 15% of the initial value, more than 15% means if the earlier GLS was 20 minus 20, it has gone down to less than 17, that is more than 15% of the original value. It means that subclinical LV dysfunction has started settling in those patients of breast cancer who are undergoing chemotherapy. Now I'll switch on my gears, switch my gears to show you a live demonstration of this particular technology by EchoPack. First of all, I hope everybody is able to see my EchoPack screen.
Yes, sir.
This is one of the things which we are able to get. Like I'm working on a machine. All of you can see that I'm just sitting on a machine and working on it. Only fact is I can't acquire images over here. This is the same kind of pattern which you have in a machine system. So I'll have acquired my 4-chamber view. I'll show you my 4-chamber view which has been acquired. It'll take a few seconds. Now this is 4-chamber view which I have acquired for my own machine and brought it over here. Similarly, I have acquired my 2-chamber view and I have acquired my 3-chamber view. The most important thing for acquisition of these views are, look at this sector. This sector should be adequate, like 60 to 75 dB. Most important thing. Then second thing is the image acquisition should be perfect. If you ask me to give numbers for this image acquisition, now it has been acquired by me from 1 to 10 scale, I'll say it's still 7 or 6. Much more better image acquisition is there, has to be there. So we acquire 4-chamber, 3-chamber and 2-chamber view and we go to measurement in this particular fashion. And all of your machine, if you happen to look at this button of AFI, as soon as I press my button of AFI, the machine start processing, and in the time it's taking a processing is, then it gives you a Plex window, 4-chamber and 2-chamber view. We select Plex window, and as we select a Plex window, what does it the machine does? It automatically draws a line across this 3-chamber view or a Plex view, where this is basal posterior wall, mid posterior wall, apical posterior wall, apical anterior septum, mid anterior septum and basal anterior septum. In couple of machines which are not as advanced as this in EchoPack, you have to put a line like basal posterior wall, apex and basal anterior septum. And once we put on this line, this image comes up automatically by processing. Now number of times what happens? Whatever you saw, whatever is being drawn, they do not correlate with each other. So what we do? We can adjust these images according to the endocardial border. Correct? So that's how we can adjust these images according to endocardial border, so that this inner line should be an interface between endocardium and the LV cavity. And this is a thickness of this evaluation or region of interest. This region of interest is 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter or 5 millimeter. This ROI is like, you can reduce this ROI. Now look, I'm reducing this ROI and we can see how much the ROI is. And looking at this ROI, this has gone into tracking into process. That's not a problem. We'll come back and reprocess this again. And I'm going to wait to 4 to 5 millimeters. So that is how I have drawn this image. And once I have properly adjusted these images, then I can go for processing. Now it's taking time to process this image. Majority of machine will be much faster than this particular image in the fashion. Now look, what exactly does it say? I'm not very happy with this processing. So I'll say that I'm not very happy. So I go reprocessing. And in this process of reprocessing, I'm not very comfortable because my images were reasonably good and I really altered them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to 4-chamber, then come back to 3-chamber view again. And then ask the machine to Plex view, process it. And as you see, the machine has processed this very well. I say process further. And now you can see a couple of very important things. Look, this segments could not be analyzed properly. This segment could not be analyzed properly. This shows cross. This is minus 25, minus 16, minus 15, and this could not be analyzed. So I'm going to reprocess it so as to adjust this image again. which you can do, all of you can do in your system. Am I going to go back again and ask the machine to process it? Well, now these two segments are not being processed properly. I'll go back again, reprocess. And many of you must be having a doubt in my mind. Look how these things are so cumbersome that we have to reprocess them again, again, and again. The reason is we do not have a very good imaging quality. If the imaging quality is adequate, then the reprocessing will not happen. So even here, this is not still. I'll try to adjust this image further, and so that we are able to process it till all the images they get a definite 2-dimensional stain value. Still not happy, so I'm going to do it again for you. I hope this time it should be okay. Many of you can ask me this question, where to put this image over here. This is basal posterior wall and this is basal anterior septum. Look, this basal anterior septum should come over here, and that is possibly a reason that this is hanging in between. So I'm going to reprocess, bring this basal septum all the way down, and reprocess. So one take-home message is you have to have an excellent imaging quality. I'm still not happy with this. So what I'm going to do is, for saving a time sake, I'm going to say this and accept this as a values. I'm not going to put much value on this because I have modified these values. And if you look at this light blue color, this is a wavy line over here. Red color, this is again a wavy line over here. So this is all dependent on the images which were not acquired properly. But let me go back again and acquire image again. I said, no, I don't want to approve it. I'm not happy with you at all. So I'm going to take this image further again and bring back for reprocessing again. Now at this time, I want to increase a little bit of gains. So they let the computer analyze this gains a little higher and trying to understand which is endocardium, myocardium, and now it's going to process by increasing their gains. And there it does the same thing again. Now these two segments, they are contracting less, and my apical segment is not contracting properly. And I'm going to adjust. And why, the reason I'm trying to spend time on this, I'll tell you in a couple of minutes. So this is how we acquire all these images together. Now I can say then appropriately that look, these images are reasonably okay. So I'll say approve and select next. What do I select next? 4-chamber. And here is the 4-chamber view which I'm going to select. I say now 4-chamber, process. Now it's processing 4-chamber. And I said couple of machines. There you have to draw this line or align them. Look, it was going out completely. So I had to align them completely. You can do them. Look, computer is intelligent. But who made this computer? You. So you can adjust these images as far as possible. So now I'm processing them. Well, this time I could get only this apical segment which is not contracting, apical lateral wall. I said approve and select next. What is the next image left is 2-chamber view. So I'm going to drag out 2-chamber view from my armamentarium. Go to 2-chamber view is going to run the shots by itself. Otherwise, you put a sample volume, one over here, other over here, and third over here. It will draw a line. I say process. This appears to be reasonably good, much better than 3-chamber and a 4-chamber view. And I don't think anything wrong will come. Look, it's come very well over here. So with this now, the most important thing is it all depends on what quality of images we have acquired. Correct? Now I say approve. Correct. Now look at this values now over here. As I said approve, what is then? He has got into a global longitudinal strain or GLS, where the GLS is a little variable kind of a GLS. GLS peak full 4-chamber view minus 14.9. Then two chamber view 16.93. Then apical long axis view 17.8. And average GLS is 16.33. And if I constitute this average GLS to ejection fraction, it will come out to be almost 49% of ejection fraction. Correct? Now you'll say, look, whatever we did was not right. And that's why the GLS is coming low. Friend, that's what not the true answer is. If you happen to calculate this ejection fraction is, this patient has got a good ejection fraction because his global longitudinal strain is low, but global TCS circumferential strain is well maintained, which is compensating his systolic function as on right now. How do I say that? That is compensating the systolic function. Look, if you calculate this ejection fraction, nobody will say the ejection fraction is almost 50%. Everybody will say it's close to 60% of ejection fraction. Not only this, look at the ejection fraction of this. Look at the ejection fraction of this. The most important thing is, look at the shortening of this particular view. This is global circumferential shortening. Is hypercontractile, and if I can put these two images together, let me try if I've got this signals of putting two images together. So if I'm able to put two images together, yes, I should be able to put two images together. And if I'm going to put this image over here, yeah. Now look at these two images. The amount of contraction of this particular short axis view is much more than the contraction of this. And this is what is happening. By two dimensions echo, this global circumferential strain is compensating its ejection fraction by little hypercontraction of preserved or more GCS. Otherwise, his GLS has gone down little bit. I'll not say very much because normal is 19. And it has gone to 16.5 or 16.3. This patient who is a hypertensive, now his breathlessness or exertion, his stress echo is normal, his angiogram is normal, his LA pressure is a little elevated, and his GLS is low. And this is what is exactly happening in people who are hypertensive, despite their normal ejection fractions, but they are still breathless. It means their subclinical dysfunction has already set in, and this LV contraction GLS is being contributed by normal or hypercontractile global circumferential contractions. And that's what I wanted to show you in this particular subject, where he is hypertensive, is clinically symptomatic, echo was normal, angio was normal, stress echo was normal. He has got an elevated LV EDP and his GLS has started going down. And many of you can ask me, what is the treatment now? Well, these people, when they have this kind of a subclinical LV dysfunction, their blood pressure control has to be absolutely tight control blood pressure. Where do we use ambulatory BP monitors? Where do we use ACE inhibitory diuretics because their LA pressures have started going high and have a tight control of blood pressure, so that their symptomatology should start settling down over a period of time. Otherwise, this patient will start having a failing LV, which will not only be shown by GLS, even this GCS will start falling down, and then you see an apparent reduction in LV ejection fraction. I hope I'm able to solve this query, why it happens and how does it happen. Now I'm going to go back to my presentation, switch over to my presentation. I'll show you a couple of examples and then I'll come back again for this presentation of EchoPack. Many things I cannot talk of many things and happening today, but let me just show a quick things which can be possible today. I said ejection fraction, I've told you already. Then this is one paper talking of GLS is more reproducible measure for left ventricular function than ejection fraction regardless of echocardiographic training. What did it mean by? Anybody can ask this question. What does it mean by? Well, it's difficult to learn ejection fraction and easy to learn to assess global longitudinal strain. That's what it means by. It's very difficult, easy for the novice to learn it quickly rather than expert to calculate ejection fraction. Well, this is one important phase where we still apply this coronary artery disease in clinical practice. I've shown this case before also. I'm quickly go through it. 47-year male underwent stress echo for coronary artery disease evaluation. Images were acquired in 2 dimensions digital format and 2D strain was evaluated. Look at a CAD. This is before, this is after. This is before, this is after. And quickly I'll say there is no wall thickening abnormality as far as LV function is concerned. Then 3-chamber view before, 3-chamber view afterwards, apical long axis, and it shows excellent contraction. And we look at a GLS. GLS was almost normal, which was almost 19 or 20%. Then 2D strain after stress, GLS is much better with after stress period. Here is a 2D strain after stress, and this patient was truly negative because nothing was significant in this patient with the stress and strain. Another patient, 50 years male with a classical history of chest pain on exertion. Digital stress echo, walkover angina. During stress, he started having chest pain and the angina over a period of time disappeared. Now look at 4 chambers before and afterward, 2 chambers before and afterwards, and 3 chambers before and afterwards. And this is ECG before stress, this is ECG after stress. And look at the GLS's average is 16.6 with some kind of this territory which shows a decreased contraction. This is not a differential reduction of 2-dimensional strain in basal septum, basal anterior septum, basal anterior wall. At one time, many people used to think that this particular reduction on differential strain is important to assess coronary artery disease. This is not true anymore because I said earlier also this can happen in microvascular disease, this can happen in myocardial disease, this can happen to major coronary artery. But we subjected this patient, this is 2-dimensional strain to before stress, and here is a 2-dimensional strain after stress. Look what exactly has happened. If I've zoomed up picture is there after stresses, this particular territory shows a differential reduction in strain after stress. And when this showed a differential strain after stress, and look, patient had a typical walkover angina over a period of time. And this is still holds true even today also. And when we said, look, you don't have a wall motion abnormality, but you have a reduced 2-dimensional strain, which was amply correlated with various studies at that time. And we said you have to have a coronary angiogram because of this positive stress in 2 dimensions. He said, no, I don't have any illness. Why should I go on coronary angiogram? The same patient came back after 2 days and look at ECG shows infrolateral wall ischemic changes. TV1 is taller than TV6. Then a T-wave inversion in lead 3 AVF. And at this time, he was having a chest pain. Many of you can see, we want to see a previous ECG. And that's what I'm going to show you in a couple of seconds. Look, this is a previous ECG in resting period. This is a previous ECG after stress. There's no T-wave inversion over here in stress period. And we were able to show that this patient has got, this is resting ECG before, peak stress ECG on that day, and 2 days afterwards he came back with a chest pain and with T-wave inversion in lead 3 AVF and flattening in lateral. Look, we said we have got the illness which we showed you earlier, and then patient was taken for the coronary angiogram and that proximal circumflex disease was present, and this was amply correlated by these papers which were published during that time in JACE 2010 talking of a segmental longitudinal strain by AFI in coronary disease without LV dysfunction. And believe my words, whenever we are having this abnormality today in our echo lab, Where the patient talks of a chest pain and we cannot demonstrate any ischemia on a wall thickening abnormalities, we try to do this two-dimensional change before and afterwards because we have an acquired pictures also already with us. Only fact is, many of you can ask me why in tachycardia when the patient is breathless, how can we acquire good imaging qualities? I like to say at this moment is, let the patient settles down, let his breathlessness settle down, let the tachycardia comes down to less than 100. If ischemia of the segments will be there, they'll persist for about 7 to 10 minutes after the stress period. And I'm sure majority of people, this settles down after 8 to 10 minutes after the stress as far as their breathlessness is concerned or tachycardia is concerned. And that's what still being used. But the sensitivity and specificity of this particular technique is little low. If it's present, it suggests it does not diagnose 100% in all subject. And that's what I say, when you look at these kind of things, you should have a high index of suspicion for coronary artery. Let's move to another issues quickly on this. If a patient of LVB comes to you, you look at a global longitudinal of this same patient, and then what do you see? This is one slide which talk of a GLS, GCS and ejection fractions. It says that GLS can provide a better risk assessment than ejection fractions in these patients of left bundle branch block. How? Look at this 4 diagrams, event-free survival and over a period of months, the follow-up of these subjects. My ejection fraction is more than 40%, but my GLS is less than 12.2. This is global. So the cumulative survival graph is like this over a period of month. But if my GLS is less than 12.2, but ejection fraction is less than 40, look, my graph survival goes down. On the contrary, ejection fraction is more than 40, GLS more than 12. Look at the graph over here. It's over here. And less than 40 and more than 12.12, here's the graph. What does it suggest? If you happen to look at this total graph is, look, ejection fraction is, this is more than 40, this is more than 40. This is GLS minus 12, this is minus 12. It means to say that GLS plays much more important role than ejection fraction in these subset of population who has got a left bundle branch block ejection fraction and subsequently assessing their survival rate. Ejection fraction. What else you can put? So we come back again to this GLS. I hope I am audible now again. So this is how we look at many of these subjects presenting with LV functions. Now let's look at more things to happen. This is RV strain. Let's switch on my gears now. I'm going to go to my laptop again. Stop. So here is my laptop again. I'm going to show my RV strains now. How do we do an RV strains in day-to-day practice? All right. So how do we look at these two-dimensional strain for RV is, we go to measure again, we go to AFI, then we go to four-chamber view. Now the important thing will happen, machine will only identify my LV as a four-chamber view. Correct? So what I'm going to do is, once the machine identify my LV, I can reprocess it, and this reprocess this format from this window to this window. Or you can do a three-chamber view, apical long axis you can utilize. What I've done, I have reverted my images on LV side to RV side. When we have done this, we ask the machine, so I'm going to do it again, and that's how we can put this images on an RV. And then that's how we can drive my two-dimension RV strain. And let me just go back and show my pictures again from a laptop. drive whether this is acute overload or versus chronic overload. And why this is important, if you happen to see in a normal subject, this all segments, all six of them, they are contracting at the same time. Whereas in acute pulmonary embolism, all of us understand the apical sparing is present. So apical segments, they'll be contracting normally. Mid and basal segments would be contracting partially. So we can see that there's a segmental differentiation in apical, which is normally contracting, mid and basal segments, which are less contracting as seen over here. But if it's a chronic obstructive lung disease, this apical sparing will not be positive. All three segments will be showing a reduced contraction as shown in this particular slide over here. There's a contrast opposite of this also. If you have got a large LAD territory, infarction like dominant or type 3 LAD is present, in those cases what happens, the LAD wraps around the apex and supply the RV apex also. So if you have an LAD lesion, what will happen? Mid and basal lateral wall or RV free wall would be contracting normally and apex would be involved. So you have to be cautious in those subset of population to differentiate between acute pulmonary embolism versus chronic pulmonary embolism and coronary artery disease in this subset of population.
Excuse me, sir. Sorry for the interruption, sir. There is a technical network glitch. So your presentation is not on the screen, sir. So please reshare this.
Okay, I'll do that. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, sir. It is visible now, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So issue is like, look at this function over here. This is normal RV. This is acute pulmonary embolism. This is chronic pulmonary artery hypertension. In acute, we see all these three segments, but three segments of septum contracting at the same time. On the contrary, in acute pulmonary embolism, we have an apical sparing, where mid and basal segment, mid and basal lateral wall of RV free wall is less contracting as compared to apical segments and of the septum. In chronic pulmonary overloaders, we have all these three segments, they are contracting less, suggesting that we can differentiate between acute pulmonary embolism and chronic pulmonary embolism. That's how we look at these kind of lesions in day-to-day practice. Now switching our gears, we have many things in this particular to do all these kind of things. Now this is an example of a lady who's 65-year-old female subjected to stress echo for dyspnea on exertion. We are doing RV stain for this lady, and when we did a two-dimensional stain, RV stain was normal, but she had a circumflex territory infarction, ischemia in this particular patient after the stress, saying that she is suffering from a CAD rather than chronic obstructive lung disease, and when she was referred from a chest institute for assessment of dyspnea on exertion. Let's go to couple of valves because we are running time, almost 1 hour is over, and certain important things lines incremental value of exercise cardiac dysfunctions. What was that? You had a comprehensive resting and exercise echo was performed in these people who had moderately severe or severe aortic regurgitation. They had a normal LV systolic function more than 50. Their dimensions was normal and end systolic dimension was less than 25 millimeter per RV staying at rest and exercise stops it. Look, the most important thing is, look at over here. If the patient, this is a patient who has got resting LV dysfunction normal, there is no resting LV dysfunction and there is no exercise LV dysfunction. So this is a graph of these people of normal ejection fraction, severe, moderate to severe or severe aortic regurgitation. When this was getting difficult whether it should be operated or not. And this was a cumulative survival graph of these people. And if they have a resting LV dysfunction and exercise afterwards also the dysfunction increases, this was a graph. And this is further when the resting LV dysfunction was present and the dysfunction increased after exercise. This was a cumulative graph of predictive value of survival. This study was done before surgery and this was graph of their follow-up afterwards. Similarly, they look at RV dysfunction also. If there was no RV dysfunction before and after exercise, this was a survival graph. Versus no RV dysfunction